So I'm a 19-year-old, and this is my first time voting in a presidential election, and I'm definitely leaning in the more Trump camp. I don't really see why I would vote for Kamala.
On
Do you
this
have any,
specific
wait, real quick,
issue,
what are the reasons for voting for Trump?
I'd say more socially. I'm just a way more. I have more social conservative values than left-leaning values.
Like what kind of social conservative values?
I'm a Christian. I'm anti-abortion. I lean more in the anti-immigration camp, even though I can understand like the economic positives of it. And like I'm like I don't think I'm the smartest guy or I know everything, so I'm super opening to listening. And like Destiny, you're the YouTuber I probably listen to the most, even though I definitely am way more conservative.
On the Christian thing, does Donald Trump's lifestyle bother you at all? Or rather, do you acknowledge that he would be the worst morally, from a moral perspective, like the worst Christian of like the past like 5 or 6 presidents?
Yes, I could see that.
Well, hold
Not
on, wait.
more than
What would?
Kamala Harris.
Well, before we get to Kamala Harris, just compared to Obama or compared to George Bush, probably even compared to Bill Clinton, you acknowledge that like Donald Trump has like cheated on multiple spouses, is this his 3rd or 4th marriage, that he doesn't.
Yeah, but I'm looking for an administrator more than.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just from a Christian perspective, though, from an individual, that he's like personally, he's probably the worst person morally.
Yes, I can. Sure, I can admit morally he is definitely not upholding to my Christian values. Okay. Absolutely.
You think he?
But I would say across the board, none of the presidents have, and I wouldn't even advocate for like a super hard Christian government because I don't really believe in that. I believe that everyone can practice any religion they want as long as you're not affecting somebody else.
Sure, that's fine. I'm just saying, not even across the board. Trump is easily the worst person in terms of like Christian values that has been
present.
So? The infidelity, the multiple marriages, the fact that he couldn't name a single verse in the Bible.
That was
when
funny.
Asked to, well, it wasn't just funny. He truly didn't know, right? He didn't have one. He lied when he said he.
Yeah, he couldn't even say like John 3:6. Yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah, like Biden and Obama and all of them probably could at least name a verse, right? Obama literally had a scandal because he was going to like because of Jeremiah Wright and going to the church with that guy, right? So these like Trump is probably the most amoral president of the past 5, just on a personal level. Maybe it doesn't affect the governance, but on a personal level.
Right.
Do you believe in the Constitution, Owen?
Yes, sir.
And you're a strong supporter of the Constitution, I would imagine.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, you say, and I think that one of the basic liberties protected by the Constitution is the right to exercise religion. That's why it so concerns me that you have in the figure of Donald Trump someone who cares so little about the Constitution that he's willing, for instance, to try to steal the 2020 election. What do you think about his efforts to steal the 2020 election, or do you even agree with my characterization of that?
I do not think that he tried to steal the election. From everything that I have watched and read on this issue, it seemed like his lawyers were telling him that he had a legal path to do it, even though they thought that it could potentially lose in the Supreme Court. And Donald Trump went for it. And my biggest thing is that he did peacefully transfer power.
Can I ask you, do you, let's start with like sort of basics here. Do you believe Donald Trump lost the election?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I don't like that he doesn't admit it, and I don't like that he runs on it.
When you real quick on the lawyer question, because you brought up the lawyers,
yes, sir.
Do you wonder, why do you think in your mind, why do you think Donald Trump got so much private legal counsel when he had so much in the White House available to him for legal counsel?
I think if you believe that, and I'm going to use a broad term, I don't necessarily know the specific. If you believe the government or a government agency is working against you, I don't see any problem in using a outside independent like lawyer firm for personal help, even as the president, instead of using like the government's lawyers that they had set for him.
When you say the government working against you, you're talking about his own appointed people, right? Like William, like you're familiar with Bill Barr and the fact that he was like a staunch Trump supporter, right?
Yep.
Okay. So that would be a guy who's working against him. And then also all the state governments are working against him. and then all the state judicial.
Well, yeah, I understand that a lot of them went to court and they fell through on some of them fell through on appeal, like they didn't even have as much evidence as they needed, and then the ones that went to court, he lost like all of them. So like I think the 2020 election was fair, and that Donald Trump lost. I do not like, again, morally, I don't like his actions on January 6th. I don't like him sitting there for 3 hours.
Sure, but the question is, I guess, like, why do you think he genuinely thought he won?
Or do you?
I don't think. Oh, I think Trump thinks he genuinely won.
How?
And I still think he thinks he genuinely won.
Well, how could he possibly think that?
Maybe not. You might be right. You might be right.
Because listen, Owen, I think that we always try to, be aware that we can't read minds. But in this situation, you have tons of individuals who have who can attest to conversations with Donald Trump where he's acknowledging his defeat. He has everything, all the information that was coming to him that he was relying on, right? He was sending out actors that he was relying on and that he chose specifically, not just his government actors, own private investigators that he retained, own counsel that he hired specifically to find election fraud. And if they were good enough to hire in the first instance to find whether election fraud was real, wouldn't a reasonable person rely on that information? And don't we think that Donald Trump, given some of these statements, for example, when he says this is of Sidney Powell, right? Sidney Powell is saying all these conspiracy theories about Dominion, saying that Dominion is stealing everything. When Donald Trump is on the record,
don't you think it can just be a campaign thing? Like most Republicans get riled up and have the feeling of like, oh, fuck the government, and like.
Yeah, but this wasn't just stuff he was campaigning on. This was stuff that he was trying to overturn the election on, right?
You're saying back in 2020?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he knew he lost because he's saying, right, about Sidney Powell's series, for example, that she's a kook, that it's like Star Trek, that she's getting owned by Tucker Carlson when Tucker Carlson's pushing her. And notwithstanding the fact that he's on the record saying she's kooky, she's crazy, her theories are bunk, notwithstanding the fact that he raises these claims, the counter responses are given, and there is no response by Trump whatsoever, and then he re-raises them. You believe that he genuinely thinks he lost the election. On what basis do you believe that he genuinely thinks he lost the election?
I think I was wrong. I think you guys were right.
Okay, so
I just hopped in here, saw the notification from Destiny, started streaming. Bog ahead, hop in here.
I'll let Destiny.
On that one, I think you're right. Actually.
Okay. So then, if you think that we're right, that is, if you think that we're right, and that you agree that A, Trump lost the election, and B, Trump knows he lost the election. If he lost the election, he knows he lost the election. You're admitting that you would be willing to vote, or at least you're leaning right now, for voting for someone who tried to stay in office knowing he lost the election. How could you do that?
That's what I'm struggling with. I have no idea.
Okay.
You're saying he, because I'm listening. Can you explain that one more time?
Well, basically, it seems like there's no reasonable world where you look at Donald Trump as a functional human being and think that he genuinely believes he lost the election, right? He almost for sure.
I don't think he has the okay, yes. Okay, I'm with you now. I'm following. I don't think that, even though morally he could be completely awful, and he in his head knew, it just sounds so horrible to say. I don't even know. I'm having because I wouldn't even say that I'm a Republican. I just have more conservative leaning values, I feel like.
Sure.
And I've never voted before.
Yeah, that's fair.
And everyone in my family is a Republican.
Yeah, and I understand, and it sucks that obviously Kamala's campaign is quite a bit left, and if you're a conservative, that's a tough pill to swallow, which is fine. That makes sense. I understand it. Moving on to
that's where I'm at.
Yeah, you mentioned anti-abortion stuff. You mentioned anti-immigration stuff. Looking at the immigration thing, let's say that you truly were opposed to stuff relating to immigration. I don't know if you want to restrict it more or fix the border or whatever. Wouldn't Donald Trump be the worst guy to do that, considering that he was in office for 4 years and when he already had both halves of Congress? Like, he had more congressional support when he was in office in 2016 than if he were to win in office in 2024, and he wasn't able to do anything those 4 years back then. Why would we think he's going to do anything in the next 4 years?
I like the people around him. I followed Vivek's campaign and RFK's campaign, like this cycle, way closer than Donald Trump's. And I don't 100% know who all was in his campaign in the 2016 cycle and when he was president.
Right, but the Vivek isn't Christian, right? Do you like?
Yeah, no, he's not a
Vivek?
Christian. He's
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hindu, I believe.
When you say you like the people around him, does it not bother you that any of these people could literally become like his enemy the next day? Right? Like McCarthy was a staunch Trump supporter, and now he's considered
Yep.
a rhino. Or
Yep.
you know, he had good things to say about people like Cohen, who are now like Trump haters. Obviously, he doesn't work with them anymore, and everything happened with that. You've got people
Yep.
like. I mean, I don't know. We'll see what happens to Giuliani and Powell if he'll distance himself from them. But like both of them have now been disbarred. You've got, I think, just recently the General Milley,
called him a fascist.
yeah, called him a fascist. So I mean, like, it seems like the people around Trump. Do you acknowledge that a lot of the people around Trump seem to have really bad things to say about him? Like, he doesn't have the same vice president he was running with before.
True.
Because
He
of the
doesn't-
things that you
doesn't like
acknowledge,
that.
Owen, right? Like,
Yeah.
like you're acknowledging that he.
Well, what's the
stole-
positives of
tried to-
Kamala Harris? Like, I'm more struggling with, do I even vote in this cycle? But I feel like I have an obligation to.
Well, you could always just not vote. That's okay too.
You
But
could.
I feel like
but
I have an
think there's a
obligation
positive.
to, and I kind of shit on people who sit out.
Yeah, I
even though
get
now I'm in the spot of understanding it.
No, I understand, Owen, and listen, if policy-wise you're having trouble with Kamala, I can understand why you feel very conflicted. Here's my positive case for Kamala, and I think
Okay.
I'll start by this by saying I think Stephen would be in the same boat if this were a race between Romney and Donald Trump. We would be on stream wearing Romney hats, or if it were a race between George W. Bush or Jeb Bush and Donald Trump, we would have Bush hats on
So
because
it's just anybody but Trump. Like, Trump's just the worst.
No. I think that there's a breed now, unfortunately, which is metastasized into a kind of, I think, majority. I think Stephen would agree with me on the party that is willing to subvert the Constitution for power, and they're willing to do so, even when ideologically, it's not supposedly something that conservatives should be in favor of. So, for example, I would think that one of the most principled conservative values would be preserving the transfer of power. This is something that George Washington did. This is something that John Adams did. Our most storied presidents, our first presidents, were passing on the torch. Kamala Harris, at a bare minimum, is going to do that way better than Donald Trump. We don't have to fear for the loss of our country in that way with the Kamala Harris administration. On the policy wise, you see that Kamala Harris is almost running as a centrist. She's embracing, the Second Amendment, even though she's willing to regulate every conservative. I mean, I don't want to say this, but
I don't
a lot
think
of
she knows anything about guns.
you don't think she knows anything about guns?
Yeah.
You think Trump knows about guns?
No.
Okay, so then they're at
Trump's a
least
rich
square
billionaire
on
that-
that, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like certain policies, Kamala Harris seems pretty moderate on foreign policy, but pretty establishment, someone might say.
Well, just real quick on the guns thing too, right? Both Kamala and Walz say they own guns at least, right?
Uh-huh.
I don't know that Trump owns a gun. He might.
I don't know if he does either.
Yeah, so like I don't understand which
But that doesn't
policy-
necessarily make you anti-gun policy-wise, or who's going to put more regulations and restrictions on firearms.
But again, Stephen might point to their 10 years. Donald Trump instituted the bump stock ban. If you think that is problematic from the Second Amendment perspective, I don't know why you would trust Donald Trump. And just further to that point, even assume that Trump is better on guns than Kamala Harris. Is that enough for you to vote for someone who tried to steal the 2020 election? And
No.
abortion, here's another issue, right?
Yep.
Trump is pretty much pro-abortion now. He says that 6 weeks is way too
I
far.
hate the middle ground argument. It's like if you think a fetus is a baby and like an alive baby, then there's no middle ground. There's no allowed to take pills to kill the fetus. There's no before 15 weeks. Like I think it's a living baby, so I'm just against abortion.
Yeah, so why would you vote for someone therefore?
Because he's way more moderate and he knocked it down to the states. It's not federally. This could be wrong. Wasn't it a federally funded thing? Abortions?
It was not. It's actually, there's a federal law that prevents federal funding for.
So what was Roe v. Wade?
Roe v. Wade was recognizing the individual right to abortion, but it did not provide for federal funding of abortion. It's one is saying that you can't restrict it, or the states can't restrict it.
Oh yeah, I don't think there should be a right to, because I believe it's a baby. I don't think there should be a right to kill it. on a federal
Okay.
level.
Well,
One
So
thing
I'm
I think,
fine
well,
with that
another,
right being taken away.
so there's another thing that I think is kind of important too, is that I think that, do you agree that Donald Trump is, well, I won't say a narcissist, but at least like pretty narcissistic?
Yeah.
I think that one of
Sure.
the big issues with Trump, and Obama had this issue a little bit too, in terms of like building the party. I think a big issue with Trump is because Trump's kind of in it for himself. I don't think that Trump is like healthy for the Republican Party. Like I would
No,
be,
I don't know what the Republican Party is going to do after him.
yeah.
It's,
So
it's the MAGA party. I feel like it's shifted.
yeah. So especially
Isn't it
like when he
every
gets on
20
stage,
to 40 years, political parties do kind of a switch.
I don't know if I would say that, but like I think it's problematic when he's on stage and he's saying things like, "Well, once you vote for me, you know, you don't have to vote again," right? He's saying this because he doesn't give a fuck what happens after the election, right? If as long as he wins, he doesn't care. It's whatever. Like I feel like Donald Trump is not going to be very healthy for the Republican Party, and what's more, he might even be alienating strong Republican conservative allies from the party due to how aggressive he is against anybody that he perceives as being disloyal, right? Like he said
But
really
isn't he like
negative
the
things.
most popular Republican ever? I get that a lot of people hate him, but isn't he also like the most popular? And, like,
he is very
brought
popular.
A fire to the party.
He is popular. He didn't bring fire to the party though. He just brought fire to himself. He brought his own followers, right? Like,
Okay.
do these
Heard.
people support Republicans, or do they just support the Republicans that Donald Trump supports?
I think a lot of people and voters, like the vast majority, are just like really, really misinformed and just vote with their line. Like either vote red every time or vote blue every time.
Well, but isn't that something that kind of didn't happen in 2020? Wasn't that one of the reasons why Trump was so upset? I could be misremembering this. Please come right now. But like, there were a lot more than usual people who would vote down the line, but then they would vote against him for president.
Did that happen? I know Joe Biden didn't he get the most votes ever out of any president?
Yeah.
81 million.
Uh-huh.
And that's pretty crazy. But so what does that mean? Does that mean more independents switched over to voting Democrat in
Or
that
just
race?
more Democrats went on and vote. I'm just saying that it seems like Donald Trump is not very healthy for the Republican Party. So the quicker he's gone, the quicker they can kind of move on. And
in general, I just want to, and we're gonna have to move on to the next speaker, Owen. And you can stick
Heard.
around if you want, just for a little bit. But I would encourage you to do some digging and soul searching, because I don't think that you're. I don't think that you're necessarily the most MAGA-pilled person yet. It sounds like you're some kind of traditional conservative, and if that's what you care about, I would think that the structure of the Constitution is something that you want to preserve. And I don't know how, even given all the policy differences that you've explained, how you would feel confident that Donald Trump would preserve the thing that has enshrined the ability for you to advocate for what you believe in, namely our constitutional republic. If he's willing to subvert that in a knowing attempt to steal an election, that's what you believe. I don't know how you can vote for him. But yeah, I don't know, I'll give you one final response and we'll move on to Beard Dubs.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for having me on, and I will definitely do more research. I just got into politics on October 7th. Like that was the big event that got me into it. And I'm just open to listening to everybody and talking to people and trying to learn more. So yeah, thank you guys very much.
Appreciate that, Owen.